joining us today on our LOL Extra of the Month, our esteemed guest here. It's going to be informal in nature, so I did mention some topics that I hope Dr. Anderson could cover today, but we also wanted to be flexible for questions, concerns that you might have, whether it's how NACADA and an institution interact for each other, or you on a personal, professional level, any of those issues, things that may be going on in Mason that you're wondering, you know, what are the thoughts or the perspective of NACADA in general. So that's kind of what we'll cover today. And I did ask to make this really formal, so I asked for a biography to give you a bit more background on where Dr. Anderson's coming from. So, but I do not have it memorized. So here we go. So, Dr. Melinda J. Anderson has worked in higher ed for over 14 years to include various roles in student and academic affairs. Her passion and commitment to student success has propelled her to operate in many different capacities with a focus on student transitions, persistence, and retention. Her work in 4-year and 2-year institutions has provided her an opportunity to engage with students who come from different backgrounds and have various interests. She is deeply committed to supporting students throughout their academic journey as they discover who they are while learning what they want to do. Dr. Anderson is currently the director of University College at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. UNC Wilmington is a strong, comprehensive Level 1 university with approximately 15,000 students in attendance. The University College operates under a total intake model and is first academic home for all freshmen and certain transfer populations, to include military students as well. She was previously the director of pre-health and pre-law advising at Virginia Commonwealth University down the road in Richmond, and is currently serving as our Region 2 Chair for the National Association of Academic Advising, or as hopefully all of you know, NACADA. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Anderson.
Just listening to you read it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not dead. You know? Like, it sounds so surreal. So no, thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. So excited when John invited me. So thank you. Is it okay if we kind of go around so I get a sense of the room in terms of where people are coming from and if they're faculty and professional advising?
I'm Leah Blue, I'm academic advisor for the School of Recreation, Health, and Tourism.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Antoinette Jones. I am also from the School of Recreation, Health, and Tourism. I'm an academic advisor.
Jason Cart. Wayne School of Art.
Heather Anderson. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs and Advising for the Honors College.
Erin in Global Affairs and Checks. I'm currently a graduate coordinator, but I used to do undergraduate advising.
Hermione Pickett. I'm in the Provost office. I'm a program coordinator for Adult Learning Services.
You said Hermione?
Hermione.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
That's a better response I hear most people.
Oh, really?
It's like, Hermione who?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, if you're a Potter fan.
Yeah, most people aren't at that age.
I know you were like, thank you.
Yeah,
we're writing
Yeah, seriously.
Hi, my name is Lisa Nolder. I'm with the Civil Engineering Department doing advising and retention.
I'm Jocelyn Hanley. I'm currently with the Office of Research, but I was previously with Transfer Admissions.
I'm Lindsay Thomas. I do undergraduate advising for sociology, anthropology, philosophy, and religious studies.
I'm Liz Bartles. I'm the retention specialist for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, undergraduate academic affairs.
I'm Kristen Beaver. I'm an academic advisor in the School of Business.
I'm Liz Kalinowski, I'm the Director of Advising for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And just so I can kind of get a better sense of the room, too, how many of you are already NACADA members? Okay. Oh, good. So I'm talking to my people a little bit. Okay. Well, some of the talking points that I had was just a little bit about, some of the foundational pieces of NACADA in terms of the trends from going from like this idea of practice, right, to profession. Because we actually in NACADA are actually in an interesting space where, and I don't know if everybody realizes that, but you're getting to a place as a profession where you know, it's not about people discounting you anymore, you having to explain what it is that you do. Like sometimes when you say academic advisor now, people are like, oh, I get that. Now they might say, oh, you help people get classes, and you're like, fail. But at least it's better than like, what do you do? So you teach, and you're just kind of like, well, kind of, not really. And so I think that the profession is really helping with that, especially with the completion agenda. You know, as that's kind of landed on the laps of presidents and provosts all around, is this idea of like, well, what can help us get the retention rates up? Oh, advising. Oh, advising, this sounds really good, and so people are becoming interested in that. And so NACADA is taking advantage of that and saying, you know, let's move up the profile of what it is that we do. We've become the premier organization for academic advising, and it covers, you know, from professional advising to faculty advising to advising for graduate students. You know, they don't really focus on pre-professional or law, although it's there. In my role, I was a part of the other organizations for like pre-health advising and law. And so everybody has a place at the table, and they've got these partnerships and connections. And now NACADA actually has a really strong partnership with N4A. You know, I don't know if any of you have ever advised athletics or anything like that of that nature. But athletics, you know, their advising role is totally different, you know, in terms of the compliance for NCAA and stuff like that, right? And so do you guys, is any athletics advising, how is it situated on this campus?
Well, they have their own, I think, athletic coordinators, and we've been very specific about that, saying that they're not academic advisors. So they have the role of knowing the NCAA rules.
Right.
Advisors at the university, academic advisors sign off on their course approval to be sent them.
So it's a
to
partnership,
athletics.
so they're not advising, they're just doing the compliance piece. Right. Okay, yeah. See, yeah, okay, I'm just trying to, I know that currently we have athletics advising, they sit under the university college, I think for that reason, but they do the compliance pieces. So I've been introduced into their world, and I've been like, OMG. And, you know, the stakes are really high, and they're always battling coaches, you know what I mean? So it's like, so it's interesting. So if you don't mind, I just had some like things that I wanted to make sure that I had mentioned, but please at any time ask questions, because I really want this just to be like a really large conversation with best friends that I haven't met yet, kind of thing. But to talk a little bit about trends in higher education, just walking around this campus, I mean, just the explosion in growth and building and all those pieces. And so you guys understand that there is this pressure, right, for degree attainment, you know, that's coming to the institutions, but there's more choice than ever. And I was joking earlier with John about like the history of colleges and universities, right? This idea that everybody took like the same 4 things, right? When you talk about colonial colleges, and now you see all this choice. And so of course advising has just kind of grown along with that as people have been forced to make more decisions than ever, and then time when education became, I think maybe probably mid to late 90s, you know, just the cost of education exploded when the market crashed, and then states weren't covering the subsidization anymore. And so it's one of those things when we talk about how do we think of ourselves as academic advising in terms of a community and in terms of a profession, you know, it's one of those right time, right places situations where all these market forces are converging. And what it is that we've known to do in terms of our practices that we've always been doing are now being elevated and lifted and spotlighted in a way that we're like, yes, we've always been important, and you just realized it, that kind of thing. And so NACADA, I think, really helps us to just keep the spotlight, to keep the humanity, right, in advising. I don't know if many of you are experiencing this idea of your caseload is growing, and so your time with your students is getting shorter. And so it does become prescriptive. Take this, goodbye. Take this, goodbye. Especially with pre-health advising, you know, you've got these children desperate to become physicians, and you're looking at their grades, and you're just like, this isn't going to work, you know, but my God, I've got 20 minutes to be able to get you to understand that, you know, that you're not going to be a nurse, you know what I mean, that, you know, you're not going to be a doctor right now, you know, because I believe very strongly in the philosophy of, you know, I'm not here to tell you what you're going to be, but I'm going to help show you what the pathway looks like and what you would need to do in order to get there. How do you do that in 20 minutes without sounding cold, callous, and that you don't care? And then, you know, I always love the fact that I would recognize my advisees walking across campus, be like, what's up, Bob? And they'd be like, oh my gosh, you recognize me. And then I'd be like, what up, Bob? I'd make it even worse, you know? Right. But, you know, now it's like your time's dwindling, and so it's very hard. So how do we keep the humanity in advising? I think NACADA helps us with that. I have mine. I thought I might be giving this. Oh, you know what? I'll hand them. I'll pull them up because I think you guys might. Have you guys seen this one?
Yeah.
I don't always have holds on my account, but when I do, I go to academic advisor.
Sounds good.
I love them. I just saw this the other day. I was like, love this. I always send stuff like this out to my students, like, you need to come see me. There's this one like GIF where this girl's crying, you know what I mean? I was like, don't let this be you. Come see your academic advisor. So then I saw this one. And I'm like, this could be the student or the advisor. You know what I mean? Because we just finished our registration stuff, and so now you're getting the people who are bumbling and stumbling in because they had holds or they were like, what, registrations are taking place? So, you know, you got those. But I think the biggest thing that I've connected to with NACADA overall is this idea of shared experiences. You know, the first time that I was able to sit down with people who were doing the work that I was doing on my campus, it was just like the heavens opened. You know, you make a joke like when I just showed, you know, the whole course registration, it's done. Like we get that immediately, you know, and so being able to go to NACADA, or whether that's through a state involvement or regional involvement or at the national level, just being able to have some place to talk about those shared experiences is just so powerful. And then, of course, when you're talking about your experiences, it becomes these networks. So how many of you would say that you, maybe somebody across campus and you realize that you guys are doing the same work, and then all of a sudden this friendship blooms, and right? And so really, when I first thought about joining NACADA, I was really looking forward to really just, being able to connect with people who get me, so I don't have to keep killing my husband every night with the same stories, and then somebody that might be able to help, you know, iron sharpens iron, you know what I mean? Maybe somebody's figured out a really good way to build this mousetrap, and that's something that they're like, hey, take this, I developed this, I think it'd be really great for you, and then you develop something and somebody's like, I'm struggling with X, and I'm like, oh, here, John, you could do this, and you're like, you've just saved my life, you've saved time. And so the power of networks with NACADA is just very strong there. And then, of course, the role of your campus climate. So just real quick, so nobody was faculty, nobody was a faculty advisor. So the role of administrative faculty. Okay, so the role of campus culture, you know, plays a lot into how people perceive academic advising. I've worked at a small liberal arts institution where it was the advising office takes care of the transfer students who are problems, but we're a faculty advising model, and so we want all the freshmen, right? Because they're clean slates, they're easy to work with. But then I've also worked in institutions where, you know, it's a professionalized first-year experience, and so you have really high caseloads, and so people look at you as saviors, like, thank God I had a place to send somebody, because I didn't know what to tell them.
I have a question about that.
Oh, sure.
It's relating to caseloads, because when we went through advising reform, that was the big thing of trying to find balance for the advisors, and ultimately that go through. But what we were looking for was guidance that we could pull from NACADA on that.
So you were trying to figure out what was that number, right? That magic number.
Or somebody has said this is the recommended number.
Well, you're not going to like this
use
number. NACADA actually has a number. It's 300. But the issue with it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's way less than what I do.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not a full-time advisor.
Right. And when you think about models, so 300, right? But so let's pull that apart a little bit. So do you have mandatory advising? How many students are on your campus? How many staff members do you have to support that? So when we start talking about what is the ideal number, there's a lot of advisors, like for example, in my university college, I know many of you are familiar with like first year experiences, right? So seminars, then you have academic programming, common reading experiences. So my advisors are split. So somebody has the common reading experience, but then they also have, they have an advising load. So at times in the semester, it's kind of like my program is more important than maybe seeing the student. And so, you know, as an administrator, you're kind of like, you always need to be able to see the student. But I'm also like real with myself too that, hey man, if this program doesn't go off, it's a problem too. You know what I mean? So maybe I can't see that student, I'll have to wait to see that student. But we know that there's critical times in the semester where we want to get those students in as soon as possible. And so, you know, the role of the advisor on the campus is often split in many different ways where it might not accommodate a certain number of students, given that maybe your only responsibility might be, well, I shouldn't say only, but you know, like you're advising, you're not teaching anything, like another first year seminar course, or maybe there's academic programming you have on campus. So I think that you do have to be very careful about saying what that magic number looks like, because as you keep adding to people's plates, you know, because my thing is a quality versus quantity issue. Like, yeah, you could get through 250 people on your caseload, but what is the quality of the advising experience that the student's going through? And we all know that, you know, advisors do make a difference. You know, there's a student that we can all think about that was like, I don't know if this angel would have made it unless they'd come to my office. And I know I am one of those students that I decided, I think it was a junior, I think it was a second semester junior, and I was like, I don't want to major in this anymore. And she looked at me and was like, oh, okay, but this is what's going to take for you to do the other things you're thinking about. And I was like, oh, I'll just graduate with this major. You know what I mean? Because you're thinking about time, money, energy, and I was like, fine, I'll do it. I actually majored in mass communications. And this is so sad. So I get to my junior year and I'm like, how much money am I going to make in this job when I come out of here? And they were like, oh, about $23,000. And you can start the radio, like the 3 to 6 shift. And I was like, 3 in the morning? But you know, so my thing is advising matters. Let me tell you, advising matters. And I mean that both ways, you know, because we start earlier having those conversations with students to be able to, you know, help them realign their expectations about how they see themselves in the workspace, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a career counselor, but if somebody would have asked me maybe in my freshman year, like, how much do you think, you know, you would make working in, you know, in the radio? I would have been like, oh, probably like, you know, $40,000, and they would have been like, child, please, and then I would have been like, maybe this isn't the major for me, but nobody asked me that question until I started doing my internship into my field experience, which is in, you know, the later half of your career. I mean, so those things, they do make a difference. Let me think, so I had connection. Oh, value. Well, many of you are already connected with NACADA in many different ways, and because you're here, you understand the value and the power of this organization. But, you know, when I think about, in terms of being able to, you know, clarify what I mean value in terms of the organization, it does come out in the idea of best practices, right? There is a better way to skin this cat. Research opportunities, NACADA actually even funds people to do independent research to be able to deliver that back to the profession. And so that's very exciting to think that somebody is able to, I think it's up to $5,000 that you can request to be able to fund your research activities. And so when we start talking about research activities, you know what I mean, that takes on a whole new persona in terms of what it means to be an academic advisor. And then in terms of the career development pieces, I know that I came into this field and I was like, what does the career ladder look like? You know, I love working with students, but when I thought about starting a family and all that stuff and you know, wanted to make sure that all my bills got paid every month, I thought to myself, like, where could this go? What does this look like? And I remember when I first started in student affairs, I would say, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I work in student affairs. And they're like, what is that? And then even if I said when I worked in housing, I would say, oh, you know, I'm a residence hall coordinator. I don't know what that means. So you do teach children, you know, and so you're always asking yourself, you know, oh, I remember my brother one time was like, are you like a provost? And I was like, oh, hey, oh, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, you know, there wasn't really this idea of a career ladder outside of academic work. If you were a faculty, you knew what that looked like. It was very clear. Chair, dean, provost, you know what I mean? But when you start saying, you know, especially administrative faculty, actually we were having a really good conversation about, like, when you're administrative faculty, like, you don't belong anywhere. You're kind of in the middle, so you're not instructional faculty and then you're not staff. And so what are the protections for this population in the group in terms of how you see yourself moving forward? And so NACADA actually really helps you understand, well, what this career ladder could look like for you. How do you develop yourself to move to the next level? And then the biggest piece that I think adds to the value added is recognition. So the awards process and programs that they have to be able to highlight what we're doing in the field, to be able to say, we know that what you're doing matters on your campus, and we'd like to be able to share that across the world because we're global in that sense. You know?
That's what we try, or we're looking at trying to tackle or make sure we put that. Because I mentioned earlier, we have the Academic Advisor of the Year, which is student nominated.
Mm-hmm.
We've had on and off discussions about having a peer nominated award.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're trying to do is get on this cycle of remembering the NACADA level of recognition.
Right.
Terry, who you met, the advising effective specialist, that's one of the things she's supposed to be keeping as a reminder of part of her responsibilities, since she has connections to all units.
Right. And you know ODU, or ODAN, so very similar to MAAN here. They do a really good job of, their model looks like what you do at the Nationals. So when you do it on your campus, boom, they turn around and they send it to Nationals. And so every year, they're consistently winning awards for their people. And then they're able to take that recognition and say, globally, we've been recognized, and taking it back to their campuses. And that makes a difference. You know, I have a new chancellor, and he's all about rankings and numbers and bells and whistles and buttons, you know, whatever it is. And so it's really, I think, important to keep in mind that those things do matter, you know, and it carries a lot of weight at the national level. In terms of purpose, you know, we talk about growth, development, and empowerment a lot. You know, not only from wanting to get involved as a volunteer in terms of leadership positions, but then how you see yourself growing and moving into the field. What are maybe, well, who's been in the field probably 5 years or less? Okay. Do you have any questions around what should I be aspiring to be in terms of competencies and things of that nature at a particular point in my career? Or like, do you find yourself asking those questions? Or And so what NACADA is actually doing now is that they're looking at their newest textbook that they just released has a 1 to 3 years. This is what the competency level should look like for advisors. You know, 4 to 7 years. This is what it should look like. And so it's an idea of having a growth chart for you, which is very powerful because you can set goals for yourself. So even if you're working in a department that says you're doing a great job, but they really don't know how to tell you to keep growing so that you can be moving forward, they do offer resources like that. So then you are kind of gauging yourself and measuring yourself up against where it is that you should be as you move forward in your career and beyond. And we know how valuable advising is into other spaces on campus. You know, it's so funny when you're talking to a faculty member and they're like, oh, blah, 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 and you're like, oh yeah, because of blah, 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 and they're like, oh, what? And you're like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? You're just kind of like, yeah, I know everything about you and your business, and you don't know jack about mine. But it kind of reminds you, though, of your value across the institution because you're seeing these connections and you're seeing how they might, there might be rubs and things like that as you kind of move forward. And so when we start talking about growth, development, and empowerment, I did want to highlight some things, and then definitely let's just start talking and, you know, questions you might have. But for leadership opportunities, I first got involved in our regional conference. So there are opportunities at the state level, and then there's opportunities at the regional level and at the national level for leadership. And you can really get involved in any midpoint. Sometimes people think, oh, I need to be in NACADA for 5 years before I move into a leadership role, and that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of commissions and interest groups. For example, I was a part of like the health professions interest group, and so you could be a chair of that interest group, or there's other commissions, like I think Peer Mentor has a commission, and so you could be the chair of those types of things. I was also a mentee in the Emerging Leaders Program, which was this idea of...
I was a mentor.
Oh, and in ELP?
No, through NACADA.
Oh, for the region.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I love our mentor program. I think we're the only region that has that mentor program at that level. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Region 2 rocks. And so the idea is that, you know, people are coming in, they're like, I don't know what I want to major in, right? For NACADA, I don't know if it's an interest group or a commission, or I don't know if it's to be Region 2 chair. Because when I first came into the ELP program, I was trying to figure out my major and ended up being connected to somebody who actually sat on the board. So when I started talking to her a little bit about what I wanted to do, she could pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got somebody that would be great who's interested in learning more about your area. And so sometimes we know that those networks are so powerful that that's all it takes is maybe a phone call to really be connected. And so we've had this ELP program for almost 8 years of really intentionally connecting people with how to grow in the organization, because we're a volunteer army. You know, nobody gets paid for this, you know, and so it's this idea of trying to completely bring in new folks who are coming in and bringing them up the ranks so you don't have the same people kind of doing the same jobs at the top. And so I do appreciate the fact that they do focus on diversity. So not just in terms of like ethnicity or race, gender, but also institutional type, you know, which is really huge. So making sure that community colleges are at the table and things of that nature. I already talked a little bit about research opportunities, but they also have like degree programs and other educational opportunities. And I separated that because they are connected with Kansas State. And so we do have this Center for Research that they're actually going to be opening in the next year or so. So I'm really excited about that. That was a really big deal for us. But then you also get a master's degree in academic advising practices. And so just the idea of credentialing and a master's program around our field was huge. And they've been able to do that through Kansas State. But then we also have an opportunity to go to institutes, and so there's an administrative institute or a summer institute. Now they have one on using predictive analytics, because now that's prevalent. You know, everybody's kind of looking at, I think you guys have EAB, yeah, Student Success Collaborative campaigns, right? That's at BCU, you know, all about those. I had a lot of campaigns around nursing students, like, these angels aren't gonna make it, what are we gonna do, you know, how do we move them forward? And so they really are on the cutting edge of what is it that we think that you're gonna need to be able to continue to do well, and they're trying to be on top of that. And then, of course, conferences, you know, we probably started there, but I mean, there's still a really great place to go and get best practices for you, professional development, to be able to go and present. You know, when I always identify people doing things that are really, really well, I'm like, you know what, share that with others, you know, and then that builds a different skill set. You know, because sometimes people think, oh, I don't know enough about this to be able to talk about it. And I'm like, oh, you're dead wrong. You're doing so many wonderful things. People would just love to even know how you thought about that program, or how did you gain influence at your institution to even be able to implement that? Like, people are really wanting to know that information. Then they do offer webinars for people who can't get off their campuses. I mean, it's hard to travel these days, you know, money, professional development, that's the first thing that goes. So webinars are an opportunity, and consultants and speakers, so if you wanted to bring somebody to your campus, or if you're looking at a program review, those are opportunities as well. And then they just have a variety of resources. I have my, like, I think it's in here, because I just didn't know what my day would look like, but, you know, basically, you know, really robust materials, books, so not just websites or articles or resources, but, you know, this is called Academic Advising Administration, Essential Knowledge and Skills for the 21st Century. And so when you think about who's leading our institutions right now, when did they go to school? 60s or 70s? You know, nobody was like, hey, John, how you doing? You feeling good? Why didn't you go to class? No, it was very Darwinistic, right? You made it because you were supposed to be here. You know what I mean? And so when we're talking to upper levels of leadership and having them understand that this is a different student that we're seeing, this is a different day and age. You know, freshmen coming into the institution this year were born in 1997. And I almost cried. I almost cried, because I was like, real tears. I was like, oh my, you know where I was in 1997? The fact that I could tell you where I was, I don't want to think about it. But, you know, that's our reality. And so we're always talking about this idea of influence. How do I influence the powers that be to understand some of the challenges that we're seeing here on this level? You know, how do we make that relevant? How do we make that important, you know? So, I mean, I think that that's a lot of how we've been able to change things as a profession, because we've recognized that, you know, it's a different day and age, it's a different game, and if we can kind of help them reach the gains that they're looking to get to by looking at what it is that we do and making that practice better, then a lot of people become more receptive to that, especially since their jobs are actually really tied to these performance outcomes and these measurements. And I think that was I think that was my last slide. So any questions, anything that you guys have, or anything from what I've mentioned, or?
I'm just curious to know, especially like